Hello everyone, this is Mini Ninja speaking. For today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Romankey Cross Cowl Onwei-chan Gungirl Jessica Aster figure. Namely, this is going to be the deluxe version of that particular toy. And as we're looking at the packaging here, you can kind of tell what this really is a heavily inspired homage, or legally distinct take on Rebecca from the Cyberpunk Edgerunners animation series. Now, to kind of give you an idea how this particular toy work, or toys in the case of this particular deluxe version, the gist of it as a whole is that the figure itself is heavily based on, and basically it's just a recolored version of the Romankey naked female blank buck, which you can use for customization purposes and had been sold for a while prior to this. Only now it's been dressed up quite a bit more with some more unique settings, like extra tattoos and the unique neck joint and head sculpt there, to make it more similar to the character that this is heavily inspired by. But for shits and giggles, they also included a untattooed body to go along with it. And so basically you can kind of mix and match things as you need to, including there's actually a regular neck on top of that as well. And on top of that, in their various character accessories, they include this incredibly amusing take on an instruction guide of how to assemble the various pieces, including the very big gun and the various ways you can assemble that, and the other weaponry and clothing for that matter. Now, we're going to look first at the not Rebecca, the more tattooed take on it, or more character-specific one, which, as you can see, is going to be standing at about a little under 6.5 inches tall, which, when we get to that, pretty much puts it roughly about at scale with, I would say, most Marvel Legends figures and similar-sized toys, which would also kind of normally make this a little tall for the actual main character herself, as she was quite short in the original series. Now, as we take a quick look at our turnaround and start looking at the articulation, you can notice it is actually a very heavily articulated toy for that matter. On the head itself, the pigtails themselves are actually on ball joints which are freely able to move around. The neck joint, both movable on top and bottom, are also on kind of ball joints as well to a certain extent. Although the neck is a bit long, I'll say, for takes, but that's because of the way it's been sculpted in. There is some form of butterfly joints going on there. I feel the shoulders themselves, the way they've been arranged, have a little bit of limited movement, but you can only do so much when also the joints themselves are very skinny. Elbow joints, honestly, just fine. Bicep rotation. The hands come off a bit easy for these large metallic hands, which, unfortunately, on my copy, the fingers on a few of them, especially the thumbs, tend to pop out a bit, or I should say specifically the thumbs, which is a pity because the fingers actually have individual articulation going on themselves and have some free range. It's just that the way this is set up, certain joints tend to pop out more than others, or in cases of some of the fingers, just quite loose. You can actually see the metal pin that is supposed to be holding the things there, just not doing the job, really. Which is a bit of a regretful thing, considering that this is not necessarily the cheapest figure either. That being said, impressive metallic finish on the hands, as well as the kind of a gunmetal bits for the not-so-colored bits. But, as you might notice, both of them are the same color, which is not necessarily the case for the original character. And on that note, actually, I will just kind of elaborate on that statement right now. You'll notice that there are going to be a bunch of things that don't quite match up from the original character, Rebecca herself, to what's on this model. Namely, the neck being entirely robotic. That is not canon to the original character. She had a more of a flesh-colored neck with tattoos on it. And the tattoos here don't match up with the original character. Not to mention the clothing is also slightly different. Probably because it has to be done for copyright reasons. Legally distinct and all that, the way it's been packed up. But they do include ways to address that later. Anywho, getting back to the main toy itself, the diaphragm joint as well as the hip joints, they're a bit stuck on my copy. They do work, but it takes some force to get them to move around. Decent splits, decent hip joints. The knee joints are double jointed on there, and they just work just fine. Ankles are a bit of a sour point on this one. The ankles are actually incredibly flimsy, I feel. Toe joints. On the boots, they were stuck for a bit, but now that I managed to get them to move, they're actually kind of loose. Now, the reason I'm going to be quibbling about the joints here is because this particular batch was picked up from 5K Toys in what is supposed to be a revised version of the figure that was meant to kind of quell a bunch of the different QC issues that came in an earlier batch, reportedly. So, it's kind of knowing that these minor issues are still here on what is otherwise a very fun to pose figure. Now, last little quibble on that. The action stand you see me use on there, Yeah, it doesn't actually clip it very well. It is incredibly loose. I imagine that is probably not standard fare, but it's worth pointing out that at least on my copy, there is this issue. Now, as we move along to the accessory portion on it, which is quite a bit on this particular toy, you can kind of see we have another case of something where there's a ton of stuff going on here, which doesn't necessarily fit as you might expect if you were recognizing from the original character. Like these particular sets of guns match what you might see in the show, but they plug into the wrist peg here, which is, if you read the instructions, kind of what's expected. It's not a bad fit, it's just not what you were expecting. Now, also included is going to be a bunch of replacement pegs, as well as these little extra wrist joints. I'm not sure why those are there, but still nice to have extra inclusions. And those come in handy later in case of any breakages or something like that. And of course you have this little belt clip which holds a place to actually holster the gun, which is, aside from being slightly different color, matching the one in the series. Same with the belt here, really nicely sculpted pouches, and amusing enough, the clip on the belt actually works. Now, God help you actually trying to get this thing to open without tweezers or fingernails, but it can be done and it will open and close without a hitch. Very clean fit. Unfortunately, some of the other character-specific items don't quite match. Like this particular jack on here, very well sewn, very neat to look at, but it is definitely much too small for what the original character has. It leaves you more exposed on that one. And amusing enough, you have the character-specific underwear, which is made of a kind of a softer rubbery material, not on the fitting body on here. Ironically enough, the extra backup body there is wearing the right clothes, but that's without tattoos. So, yeah, you have to have some fun mixing that stuff up later. And speaking of which, the next batch includes things like an alternate neck piece, which is meant for the second body on here, but side note, you will need to fix the neck pegs in order to make the swap. You can see some of the alternate heads on here. It really comes with only 2 other heads with different expressions, but the eyes are movable on both, or all 3 I should say, so that is worth noting. You got a bunch of different hands going on there, which is great. In this case, one of them, pointing hands, actually came a little bent because of the way it was in the packaging, but a quick bit of heat will fix that up. And the rest of them, basically, you can kind of use them to hold a bunch of different accessories, or just kind of pose as you need. The big gun itself you saw in the back there actually is made of 2 pieces. You can either have the character hold the whole thing on there. I would suggest a support if you try that though. Or, it's something you absolutely need support for, you remove the hands from the mechanical ones and plug them in the back. Mind you, the character joints for the shoulders and stuff are not enough to support. You could also plug in the guns into this extra one and plug into the wrist pegs, but as a side note, at least on my copy, the actual pegs for the guns just don't want to stay on there, at least not for a very long time. Now, side note for changing clothes, you need to unplug the shoulders in order to pull it up, and I'm not showing you the front here because, as it turns out, they sculpted the nipples and genitalia. Oh, speaking of exposure, here's looking at the alternate feet on there. Just as loose as the ones on the shoes, I'm afraid, and the toe joints are also very loose. All in all, this is a decent homage to the original character from Cyberpunk Edgerunners, but it's just off enough in various respects to kind of annoy. Super fun to pose both bodies. They overall pose very well on here. And you could even, in some respects, get the gun to actually hold up on its own, as you can see right here. I'm not using... At least until the ankles fail, because that is exactly what will happen with this toy. 9 times out of 10, it falls because the ankles are rubbish, I'm afraid. You need to fix them up, I'd say. Honestly, great toy, very fun to mess around with, but I wish they just had the license just to do Rebecca proper and not this 75% of the way. Oh well, maybe next time. For now, thanks for watching, catch you all later.